So if you know anything about these dirt bikes, you'll obviously be able to tell I have a 2-stroke. But the thing is, I've rode and owned a decent amount of 4-stroke bikes as well. So I'd say that I've got quite a good amount of experience riding 2-stroke and 4-stroke engines. So for today's video, I just planned a little bit of a route of the local green lanes, just while I explain the differences between the 4-stroke and the 2-stroke, which should hopefully help you decide on what bike you want to go for. Okay. I think if you understand how something works, it gives you that knowledge to decide whether it's any good and whether it's actually going to fit your needs or not. So trust me, I am no mechanic, and I have used the power of the internet to put this information together. But I'm going to try my best to explain how a 4-stroke engine works and how a 2-stroke engine works, which then, oh, we're stuck now. There's a van trying to get through. Is he coming all the way back? Is by the looks of it. I'll spin round. I'm not cool and spin it round with the back wheel spinning. Yeah, so I'm hoping by explaining how a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke engine bike works, you can then get a feel for what actually fits in with what you're deciding to do, whether it's going to be green laning, motocross, enduro, or even a supermoto, do a bit of wheelies. Right, so I'm going to start with 4-stroke. Basically, stroke is in both names, 4-stroke, 2-stroke. The word stroke is essentially the travel of the piston going from top to bottom or bottom to top. So from there to there is 1 stroke. Obviously in a 4-stroke, it takes 4 strokes of the piston to go through 1 cycle of the engine. So stroke 1 is the intake. It's the intake of air and fuel getting sucked into the cylinder as it comes down. And there's always a giant puddle here. So stroke 2 is the combustion. So the piston coming back up, squashing the air and the fuel together right at the top of the cylinder. The 3rd stroke of the piston, stroke, is the ignition. And when it's on its way back down, is obviously helped out by your by the spark plug. And then the final one is the exhaust. So it takes 4 strokes of the piston up and down to do a full cycle. Right, the 2-stroke engine is pretty much exactly the same, but it does 2 things at once. So the intake and combustion happens in 1 stroke, and then the ignition and exhaust happens in the 2nd stroke. Which is why, and I don't know if anyone's heard it before, but a smaller 2-stroke engine will produce more power than a 4-stroke engine. The 2-stroke engine does 1 cycle half the amount of time as a 4-stroke. So every 2 cycles, it's producing pretty much twice the amount of power. It doesn't work exactly like that, but it sounds good and helps you understand, I suppose. Okay, so now you've got a bit of an understanding of how a 4-stroke and a 2-stroke engine works. What does that actually mean and kind of convert into riding? Well, imagine you've just done a big hill climb, and what goes up must come back down. You're coming down the hill and you're on a 4-stroke bike. So the 4-stroke, where it's got a lot more compression than the 2-stroke, it has a lot more engine braking. This pretty much means that you can rely on the engine to slow you down as you're coming down the hill, and you don't have to be on the front brake or on the rear brake as much as you would if you was on a 2-stroke bike. There will be a theme in this video. The 2-stroke and the 4-stroke engines do work completely different. So with the 2-stroke, you're back up the hill and you're coming back down. There's little to no engine braking at all. So you've got to make sure that you're comfortable with front and rear brakes so you can actually slow down before, I don't know, you hit a tree or someone else that's fallen off. Last thing you want to do is be skidding with the back wheel, skidding with the front wheel, it washes out, you're over the handlebars, and then you've just got a nightmare to pick it back up and carry on. I am going to just stop at the bottom here actually, because I need some fuel. If you know, you know, Bluebell Hill. The only thing with these enduro bikes is there's no key, and I feel a bit awkward when I'm filling up and I'm going in and paying, because anyone could jump on this bike and start it and just drive off. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but I do have a soft spot for these 2-strokes because it's what I grew up riding. As a kid, that's all there was, until we got to the 85s, and I think it was like the first year that the 150s came out. And for people who don't know, when I say 150s, they were 4-stroke, but you could ride them in the 85cc motocross class. Right, I'm sure some of you have seen this when you're flicking through Facebook, and it really does crack me up, but you're on Facebook Marketplace and you see a two-stroke up for sale. It's normally some chavvy picture, and then in the description it says, power band in every gear. Well, yeah, that's just a load of rubbish. Every bike has a power band. Every engine has a power band. It's pretty much an RPM range of when the bike will produce its maximum power. And when I say RPM range producing max power, I mean revs per minute. So again, following the theme of the video with 4-strokes and 2-stroke engines being completely different. The rev range or the power band of a 2-stroke bike and a 4-stroke bike is completely different. So if you was riding a 4-stroke and you looked at the power band on a graph, it would be quite smooth, and that's how the throttle would feel, quite smooth. So the graph would start here and it would slowly go up. I'll try and put this up on the screen, make it a little bit easier to understand, but basically the graph would go diagonally across in a smooth motion. But then you jump onto a 2-stroke bike and the graph would slowly incline up, and then it would hit the power band and it would go straight up and it would spike. So the power band on a 2-stroke bike can be quite aggressive, and that's when you see people whiskey throttle. They'll pull the throttle back, there won't be loads there, and then all of a sudden they're hanging off the back of the bike because the power band's kicked in. So if anyone says on Facebook Marketplace that the power band's in every gear, well, obviously the power band is in every gear on every bike. So where the power band on a 4-stroke is quite linear, it will go up and it's smooth. That's why people call the 4-stroke bike sometimes a lazy rider's bike. It's only a stereotype, but it kind of makes sense. With a 2-stroke, because the power band is later on in its rev range, you have to end up changing gear a lot more often than you would on a 4-stroke bike. So the 4-stroke bike has low down power, mid power and top end power. So you don't have to change gears as much, basically, which can come into its benefits. You're in, I don't know, 2nd, 3rd gear. You probably won't have to change gear the whole way up that, because it's got the low down grunt that will pull you up at the bottom, and then when you get going up the hill and you've got a bit of speed behind you, you still got that power there. But then when you get to the top and you start slowing down, it's still got that low down grunt. Whereas the 2-stroke bike, there'll be not much at the bottom, then you hit that power band and you take off, then you get your speed up. Halfway up the hill, you run out of RPMs, your power band has come to the end of its life, so then you change up a gear. Then you get to the top of the hill and you start slowing down because it's so steep. You've got to quickly change down a gear to be back in that power band. It's just something you need to take into consideration when you're buying one of them. Another thing that I think you got to think about is how you're actually starting these bikes. So a lot of the newer generation enduro and motocross bikes, to be fair, have electric starts like mine. Mine does actually have the kickstart just in case. But if you are just starting out with this hobby, you might not want to be spending loads of money, and because of that, you probably won't end up with an electric start. But why is that a thing? Why does it matter? And why do you have to think about how the bike starts? Well, the thing is, I said earlier about the 4-stroke bike having a lot more compression than the 2-stroke bike. Well, if you ever kick over a 2-stroke bike and then kick over a 4-stroke bike, that compression, you can feel it on the kickstart. 2-strokes, really easy to start. You see a lot of people on videos doing it with a hand just to prove that they're tonk. But joking aside, the 4-strokes can be quite hard to start. A lot more compression. So nothing major with that one, but I still think it is something that you should think about when choosing what bike to buy. So I said at the beginning of the video that I am no mechanic. I can do the basics, I can fix stuff, but when it comes to real engine work, I would have to send the engine off to a garage. I am hoping that in the future I get time to tinker about with engines and actually learn how they come apart and all the different parts inside, but this again is something that you need to think about when you're buying a 4-stroke or a 2-stroke bike. So the internals of a 4-stroke bike, there are a lot more moving parts than there are in a 2-stroke. I think I said that right. There is a lot more mechanical moving parts in a 4-stroke engine than there is a 2-stroke engine. So what's this got to do with anything? Well, the more parts inside, the more parts that could go wrong. But the 4-strokes are less likely to go wrong because they're not working as hard as the 2-stroke engine. I said earlier that basically the 2-stroke engine's doing 2 cycles for the same amount as the 4-stroke bike doing 1 cycle. So it's doing twice the amount of work, meaning, in a roundabout way, that you'll need to service the piston and the piston rings in half the amount of time than a 4-stroke bike. Just another thing that could add to the reasons why you do or don't want one. But I wouldn't let it put you off because the 2-stroke parts, like a piston for a 2-stroke bike, because there's less parts that you're actually buying, it's actually cheaper. So even though that technically you'd have to service or rebuild a 2-stroke engine sooner than the 4-stroke, you won't be spending as much money. It's quite a lot easier. I'm quite lucky to have some of these lanes literally on my doorstep. I've said before, they're nothing too difficult, nothing too dangerous or hill climbs or anything that you got to kind of get over, but still, it's on a day like this, it's just nice to be out doing something. So just while I'm talking about paying for things, you saw me pay for some fuel. It's a 2-stroke and I didn't mix any 2-stroke oil in with it. Well, I've mentioned in previous videos, I'm pretty lucky. This little cap here is where you put the 2-stroke oil and it mixes it up for you, but normally you would have to pre-mix it in a jerry can, then fill it up, which obviously you don't have to do on a 4-stroke engine. But on the flip side to that, a 4-stroke engine has engine oil that lubricates the engine. 2-stroke oil that you put in the fuel is what lubricates a 2-stroke engine. So it probably counterbalances the price on it anyway. So when we was talking about engine rebuild, I mentioned obviously the 4-stroke engine has a lot more moving mechanical parts, which it's not a massive deal, but the 4-strokes are heavier than the 2-stroke engines. So this means a couple of things. If you drop your bike, it's more difficult to pick it up. Not the end of the world. But for how the bike actually handles, the heavier the bike, the more stable it is in certain situations. So I'm coming up, I don't know, to an enduro event, a single track and you're flicking through the trees. 2-stroke, where it's lighter, it's more nimble at slow speeds. You can pick your way through your trees, lean one side, lean the other. But then when you get to higher speeds, they're a little bit jittery all over the place. The 4-stroke engines, obviously being heavier, at low speeds, they're harder to handle because it will lean one way and want to fall. Obviously, same the other way. Any cars? Any cars? Nope. But then on the flip side to that again, with the 4-stroke engine being heavier, at higher speeds it's more stable. So what are you going to do with this bike? Have a little think about it. If you're buying it for a super moto that you're going higher speeds compared to flicking through the enduro or green lane, would you want a 4-stroke? Would you want a 2-stroke? I don't know. I'm just trying to give you this information for you to decide, really. And it's just an excuse to get out in the countryside. Last little bit of sunshine before the winter kicks in. I'm really enjoying myself. There's no cars behind me. You know what that means. So I've got one more lane to go up to the left. and then I'm gonna slowly make my way back, pretty much doing exactly what we've just done in reverse, which is quite nice because it's a perfect little route. I don't have to follow the sat nav, I know where I'm going. It's just easy. It's a nice chilled ride. Now, two major differences between two-stroke, four-stroke don't actually matter, they're just something I prefer, but the smell and the noise. I can't tell you what a two-stroke engine smells like because it just smells like a two-stroke engine, but there's a quick difference between the noise of a two-stroke and the noise of a four-stroke. I really could go on all day talking about these different types of bikes, but I would just be waffling, so I'm in a rut, I'm just stuck. I do hope that this has helped you out in deciding what bike you want to go for, but if you do have any other questions that I haven't covered, just do me a favour, drop a comment below, and when I get a chance I'll do my best to answer it for you. And if it has helped, and you now know what bike you want to choose, also let me know. It'd be quite nice to know that I've helped someone out. But until next time, guys, take it easy, get a bike, and go riding. Bye!